Welcome to the Slingshot Group podcast. I'm your host, Tim Foote, CEO of Slingshot Group, where we build remarkable teams through staffing and coaching. And you're here for part 2 of this podcast episode on hiring trends and top questions for building teams. Part 1, we spoke with Brian Taylor from our team. Part 2, I've got Phil Bowdle here from our team. Been looking forward to this because Phil is also the producer of our podcast. So he's not used to being on this side of the mic, right, Phil? How are you feeling about this?
I'm feeling all right if you're feeling all right.
Good. So just a bit of background if you haven't caught part 1 yet. I was in the room when Phil and Brian presented a workshop recently at a conference on this topic. And I was sitting there listening, thinking this would be a great podcast episode. So we're just going to jump straight in. Phil, first trend that we want you to hit on. Everyone is doing more with less. Talk about that.
Yeah, everybody's trying to do more with less. And I think every leader that you and I talk to across all different kinds of organizations, they're all feeling like they're at some deficit of something. And that could be small organizations that feel like they don't have, enough staff, enough people, enough budget, all that. There are big organizations that actually feel exactly the same. And that could be through inflation. That could be through, changing hiring climate. That could be any number of reasons that everybody is feeling. But everybody's feeling that tension of trying to do more with less when it comes to making their mission or their ministry or their work happen effectively. And so they're all feeling the pinch of trying to make it stretch. And some of that practically, honestly, is the cost to hire great staff is more expensive than it was. The cost to keep staff is higher than it was before. So even to maintain what you were doing before can often feel like trying to do more with less. So it's a massive challenge for leaders today to balance that. And also, I think when it comes to organizations that are adjusting from COVID, where they added a lot more than they subtracted, there's also that tension now of a resettling of figuring out what do we say yes to, and actually what can we say no to? And so a lot of organizations are struggling with that. But at the end of the day, every leader I talk to is saying, I'm trying to do more with less.
Talk to the leader who's feeling the pressure and pain of doing more with less. What can they actually do about that right now?
Leading organizations right now requires us to actually rethink how we build our teams, because you can't hire your way through accomplishing all that you want to accomplish. And the people that you bring onto your team, the people that you entrust to lead your team, are going to help you calibrate what you say yes to and what you say no to. So it's all about teams, right? That's why we do what we do, with Slingshot. But that's also just the heartbeat behind so many of the leaders that are listening to this today. And so as we rethink how we build our team, the answer can't always be that if there's a need, I just hire it, because there may not be the resources there for it. So we have to rethink first, what is the need? And then figure out how can we meet that need. And sometimes the absolute best answer is we've got to do a nationwide search for the best leader to hire them and bring them on, because it's a full-time hire that needs full-time energy. That may not be the only answer. Sometimes the answer is, okay, how do we meet this need through a part-time hire or contract work or freelance? There are so many different opportunities now to bring in great talent to your team that don't require hiring somebody. It actually, though, to me, what it actually emphasizes is every person that you do bring on their team, you have to focus on bringing on leaders, because leaders can lead something bigger than themselves. If you hire doers, they're going to focus on making things happen, and you need that on your team. But often the tension is you're never going to run out of needs to be able to hire for. But a great leader can equip and build a team around them of part-time hires and contractors and rethink how they are building their team around them. And that doesn't require hiring a bunch of people.
So Phil, that makes me think of the whole conversation about generalist versus specialist. There's always times when you need a specialist, and you talked a little bit about that, doers. The generalist is the leader of leaders, somebody who can lead something bigger than them or can lead an initiative bigger than them. So important. So what's the next trend you see?
Yeah, next trend is I'm seeing a growing disconnect between senior leaders and the rest of the team. And the way that plays out often when we're talking to leaders on at the top of the organization to the bottom, that the phrase that often comes up is, they don't get us. They don't get me. And that comes from top leaders saying, hey, us as a leadership team, an executive team, C-suite, we get each other. We are bought in. We care about our mission. We believe in it. We're all in. That team or those guys, they don't work as hard as we do. They don't operate the way that we do. They don't get us. But then you talk to the rest of the team, and they're saying, hey, those leaders at the top of the organization, they don't get us. They don't know how hard we're working. They don't know what it takes to do what I do. They think I can do something in an hour that takes a day. Especially for like my background as a creative, this happens all the time. Of hey, why can't you just do that video real quick? Why can't you just design that really quick? It's like it's actually that the disconnect of what it actually takes to make that thing happen is growing larger and larger, and it's creating an us versus them mentality far too often in teams, and that's not a healthy way for a team to operate. You can't stay and stick in that disconnect of people at the top and people at the bottom not being unified in the vision and the mission of where they're going together as a team.
That's really interesting because now in the seat I sit in our organization, I feel it differently. And I see it from that point of view. Yeah. I've sat in the team seat at all kinds of different levels and have felt the frustration from that perspective. Yep. How do we do this better?
Yeah. So, let me go on a little bit of a rant here because from part of my background as a creative is that, we have to solve problems. As a creative, sometimes that's a design problem. Sometimes that's a mission problem, organization problem. But creative solve problems, and so I think how we solve that problem is all of us individually embracing our role as a creative. Whether you're at the top of the organization or the bottom, it doesn't matter. At our heart, we're all creatives. And sometimes we misidentify creatives as artists because artists are the ones that create the most abstract, different kind of things out there. It's the artist creating the artwork in the museum or that's creating something, a new product, new something. Honestly, some of the most meaningful work that's done out there is not the most artistic, but it's the most creative because it solved a problem that we had or that we didn't even know we had. So when it comes for us as organization leaders and for all of us and teams, we have to figure out what's the problem we're trying to solve. Right. For the people at the top of the organization to the bottom, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Is that a people problem? Is that a system problem? Or is that like a rhythm problem of how we're using our systems, how we're engaging our people? You can't solve a people problem with a system solution. Often we see this all the time, Tim, what happens when we try to add a new system to solve a people issue for the one person that's doing something that they need to correct. Instead of just having a conversation with the person, we create a new system. We add complexity instead of just going to the person and talking about the issue and saying, hey, I need to talk about this. Or we have great people, but they don't have any systems and they don't have any framework for how they move their mission forward. So it creates chaos. So we got to figure out what's the problem we're trying to solve and how do we work together to actually solve that problem.
So go over those 3 questions again, because I think that's really important when we talk about top questions.
Yeah. Is it a people issue? Is it a system issue or is it a rhythm issue? If it's a people issue, it might mean, okay, we don't have the right person in the right seat. Or that person is no longer a fit for the role we have, something like that. Or it's a leadership issue. We have to coach this person. We have to equip this person to be better equipped to do what they need to do in that role. If it's a system issue, it's something that the people need to be able to move their job or move their job forward, move their mission forward, or figure out how they work better together. On that, systems should power people. It should not be the other way around. But rhythms, when you think about some organizations have great people and they have great systems, but they don't have a rhythm for how they work together. If you have team meetings once every couple months here and there, you're not in a good rhythm to proactively move your team forward, right? So you've got the right people, you've got the right systems, but you need to get a good rhythm for how you're working together. So usually the problems that you find are usually in one of those 3 categories.
Are those 3 questions or categories, Phil, are they equal or do you test rhythms and systems before you deal with people?
I think it always starts with people because the right people will figure out the right systems and the right rhythms. It's usually that's usually where it starts. But often what happens is people get the blame for what is actually a system issue. people at the top of the organization, it goes back to that disconnect of people are frustrated with what's happening somewhere else in the organization, and they realize they haven't actually equipped them with the right systems and empowered them with the right rhythms to move things forward.
How often, Phil, do we get called into an organization for staffing, and we realize that actually if they'd fixed a rhythm or system issue, they wouldn't need new staff?
Exactly. It happens all the time.
Yeah, so important. So we did this with the last episode with Brian. It was so much fun, so we're going to do it again this time. Let's do some rapid fire questions that anyone who is building and leading a team is asking or should be.
Let's do it.
How can I sell to leadership that we need to hire?
Yeah. How do you sell it? You start by doing your homework. You start by actually creating a one-sentence job description. Typically what happens when you have to sell, I need a hire, is you go out there and you write like a 3-page Word doc of a job description and say, hey, here you go. Can we hire it? Can we have the money? Can we do this? And that's a hard way to pitch a new role and a new need when there's a lot on the person's plate that you're handing that over to. So the best thing that I found is create a one-sentence job description to say, this is what this role could do, and then tie it to your vision and your mission, not your busyness. If you just say, hey, I'm really busy and I'm desperate to hand this over and I need somebody else on my team, you're probably talking to somebody else that's equally or more busy, and they probably have other roles that they would love to hire too. But what you have an opportunity to do when you pitch this is to say, hey, here's a one-sentence job description, and here's how this role will uniquely move our mission forward. Here's the difference it can make. When you do those two things and you do your homework to actually maybe have the job description and get some context from how other organizations are solving that problem, you are equipping leadership around you and with you to work together to solve that problem instead of just handing them your problem of busyness. And when you do that, it's probably not going to go anywhere that you want it to go. So do your homework and be ready for that moment where you can say, hey, I think I can move our mission forward. Here's what it will take.
A one-sentence job description is kind of like a mission statement for the role, wouldn't you say? So I'm going to put you on the spot right here. Do a one-sentence job description for a marketing director.
Yeah, a good example might be this role will tell the story of what God's doing in and through your organization.
What about a development director at a nonprofit?
Making the resources happen to move the mission forward.
What about a discipleship pastor in a church?
Making clear what everybody's next step is.
That's great. Mission statements for each role, a one-line job description. I love it.
And real quick too with that, not only does that help you pitch the role, it helps the right person be attracted to that role, and it clarifies for that person what their win is for the role. When you do that, because all of us end up busy real quick, whatever the role is. But when we have that one-sentence job description to remind us, here's why I do what I do, it clarifies the things that need to be on our plate and the things that need to be off of it.
Well, it's back to what we talked about in our last episode, that healthy leadership rises and falls on clarity of expectations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Best practices for interviewing.
Yeah. I love the interview process. Love it. And what I found, I've done it some good ways, and I've definitely made some mistakes. And what I've learned is what makes the interview process work is actually what happens before the interview. It's not what happens during the interview. Because when you don't prepare for the interview, what happens at the end of the interview is just, do we like them? Do we like her? What do you think? And you don't actually have a clear measurement around, is this the person that we like for the role, for what we need? And so things that you can do before you even do the interview is get a clear picture and a clear target for what do we need in this role? What kind of person could be successful? What kind of personality? What kind of profile of a person will be able to thrive in this role? And there are tons of assessments. I mean, we could talk assessments and personality profiles all day long. We just did a conversation with Jackie Brewster about Enneagram. A great tool to understand, hey, this kind of person would thrive in this role. This kind of person may not. Leading from your strengths is one of my absolute favorite assessments as well too. Doing some things to figure out here's the kind of person that can thrive will help you, and then measure the person off of the profile that you're creating. Because when you do that, you actually have objectivity. into the conversation, because the person that you might need is actually somebody that looks completely different than anybody around you on your team. And if you don't identify that before the interview process, you tend to repel things that are different from you. And that may be the very thing that your team needs to be able to actually move that role or your team forward. And you don't do it unless you prepare for it before the interview process.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, Phil, there's so many powerful questions you can ask. What are some of those from your perspective?
My favorite question is just, tell me the story of what God's doing through your life. Because I don't want to just know about the role. I don't want them to just pitch why they think they should get that job. I want to know what chapter are they in their story.
Right.
I want to know that. What's something that you're learning right now?
Right.
You know, it's not the scripted things that people prepare for. It's the things that you get a sense of, here's where this person is right now, and they're part of their journey. So I like those kind of questions.
I think questions too, Phil, that reveal self-awareness, because we know that that's one of the number one traits in healthy leadership. But also, tell me a time that you've tried something and failed. Tell me about somebody that you've raised in leadership and mentored. What are the trophies in your trophy cabinet? You know, what are the things that are important to you? You know, if this was the last day of your life, what would you be talking about? What would you be doing? Things that really reveal the character of a person and a leader. What do they want from those that lead them? How do they lead up? How do they lead in both directions really well? That kind of thing. I think it's important.
When you ask good questions, you should hope and expect for good questions to come back to you.
That's what I was going to say. That people overlook the fact that they need to come to an interview, candidates, with a bunch of questions. And then as leaders, we need to be watching for those questions. Do you have any questions for us? Oh, no, I think I'm good. Ooh.
Yep. No, you want a good interview is not one way; it's two way.
Yeah, that's good. So, how can I approach volunteers to ask them to take on higher level responsibilities?
Yes, I love this question. You know, one of the most powerful phrases that I've experienced myself, and I've been able to experience in sharing it with others, is, "Hey, I see this in you." When you have a volunteer that you see something in, don't take for granted that they see it as well, because they very well may not. You may be the only one that sees a level of potential in that person for them to do something greater and bigger and have an even greater impact. So my favorite way to do that is to say, hey, I see this in you, and here's my vision for you, for a role that you could step into. Are you open to that journey? Are you open to working together? And here's what you can expect from me as a leader. And here's what I'm expecting from you. Are you open to that? That to me is, you know, at some point in all of our careers, somebody did that for us, whether they said those words or not. They saw something in us that we probably weren't ready for, we didn't deserve, we didn't earn it, but somebody gave us a shot. And we as leaders, we've got to be more open to giving people a shot. You know, when we've talked about this some in the podcast. I mean, sometimes when we hire somebody on our team, or we cast vision for the kind of person we want to bring on our team, we raise the bar so high that not only nobody else can meet, but we ourselves can't meet. You know, we hear leaders all the time create a bar that's so high that like that's just nobody. It's not even just a unicorn. That person doesn't even exist. And sometimes the senior leader in the organization could even meet those requirements. So we've got to be more open to giving people a shot, because somebody gave us one. So when we can do that for others, and we can not only say, I see this in you, but I've got your back, and I want to journey with you, and I want to help you, I want to coach you. You have the power to not only change your team, but you have the opportunity to change somebody's life and give them opportunities that may not happen otherwise. So don't underestimate the power of saying, I see this in you.
Well, and Phil, we say that the healthiest cultures we see in the ministry organizations we work with are ones where there is internal promotion. Because great leaders say to their team members, hey, if I'm doing my job well, you'll continue to grow in your role and potentially won't be doing the same job in 2 years.
Exactly.
And being open-handed enough that might be here, or it might be at another organization. God's going to continue to write his story, and I'm going to develop you as a leader. So I think calling that out is so important, whether it be a volunteer or a team member. That's a sign of good and healthy culture.
Yeah. Coaching will get you where bossing will never take you. When you can have a posture of a coach as a leader, you have an opportunity to actually bring in leaders that are hungry to be molded and shaped. Younger leaders get sometimes a bad rap for only wanting it one way or another. Like the younger leaders that I'm seeing right now, they are desperate for somebody to pour into their lives. They are desperate for somebody to say, hey, tell me what you see in me and how can I get better? How can I grow? They are not looking for a boss. They are not looking for a manager. They are looking for a coach that is open, like you're saying, to hold their work and their life with open hands to say, hey, you may be with me for a month, a year, a decade, whatever it is. I want to help coach you to be better than you were yesterday. And when we do that, we're going to naturally be a magnet to the right kind of leaders that are hungry to grow with you and for you.
So, Phil, I'm going to shift directions just a little bit because you're a rare breed. Like, I am so grateful to get to work with you at Slingshot, but you've been a creative leader in the church space.
Yep.
You wrote a book called Rethink Communication. You moved out of the church space into church support work. Mm-hmm. You work with a lot of nonprofits. You're our VP of marketing. Talk about the whole communications and marketing world right now and some of the challenges for ministry organizations that they're facing in getting their message out.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like what we said. Everybody's trying to do more with less, and everything communicates. So everybody feels the tension of communication. And when you had something like COVID and the pandemic raise the level of need and awareness for communication and storytelling, it has dramatically shifted the landscape for all, corporate, ministry, nonprofit, all of them are feeling the same thing. And they're desperate to get the right people that can help tell their story. And so it's created a lot of opportunity for creatives to say, oh, I don't actually have to work with one organization. I can be freelance. I can be contractor. And those are like we talked about, those are great ways to utilize those people. They may not be on your payroll. They may just be on an invoice for a project or something like that. So it has dramatically changed the landscape of communication, but it has not dropped the importance and the need of communication being the glue of most missions moving forward. It's vital, more vital than ever before on that. So we got to get it right.
Are ministry organizations prioritizing this area?
No.
And how do they need to do it better?
I think they've taken for granted that communication's happening, and that's a bad assumption. It's a dangerous one. So yeah, it's not. It is something that if you don't invest in it, it could be the kryptonite to your organization. It really could. So you've got to invest in it. You got to prioritize it, and you can't outsource it to assume that it's somebody else's job. It's everybody's job. Everybody has a role to play.
So talking of top questions, what's the top question you should be asking as an organizational leader or a team leader today around communications and marketing?
Oh, there's so many. I think, if I probably where I'd start is who's worried about it so I don't have to be. And that I don't say that to say that that's the excuse that you shouldn't be worried about it, but there needs to be somebody that is actively dreaming and casting vision and moving mission forward for how you communicate as an organization, both internally and externally. And that can't always be the senior leader. That can't always be the top of the organization. There are, the reason I say that is there are so many missed opportunities for churches and nonprofits when it comes to communication. And it's not just a thing to promote what you do. Like there's actually ways to, when you think of churches and nonprofits, if they use the tools that we have for communication, not as a vehicle to promote the ministry and the mission, but actually as a way to engage people in the mission, you might be surprised by how much things can change by actually using that as a tool to actually make your mission and your ministry happen, especially for churches. It is a digital mission field out there waiting to be reached, and there's not many that are actively and proactively trying to reach them. So we got to stop missing opportunities, and it takes us investing in not just assuming that it's going to get better, but actively engaging people to be able to trust them to move that vision forward.
Well, as I do on all of these podcast interviews, I self-analyze.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ask myself as an organizational leader, who's worrying about this so that I don't have to be, the answer for me is you. So keep worrying about it.
I'm worried about it.
And
no doubt.
to land the plane on this topic, we obviously ended up in communications and marketing. Let's go back to hiring trends. How does that play a part in hiring trends?
Yeah. You have to be able to tell your organization's story, and that story has to be so compelling that somebody says, "Hey, I've got to have a conversation with that team. I've got to have a conversation with that leader." It's marketing. It is, and that's one of the joys that we get to do in Slingshot. And when somebody says, "Hey, we need to find and hire a great leader, but we don't have the network anymore, or we don't know the person. We need somebody to help tell that story." Like, we love going out and telling that story.
We say we're translators, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And honestly, it's almost easier to hear it from somebody else that isn't in that organization, because we get to say, as a somewhat neutral party, to be able to say, "Hey, here's what we see in this organization, and here's what we see in you." So it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. Like, you need a marketer, and you need somebody that's helping tell your story, and in your organization, and especially in hiring.
So much helpful information in this conversation today, and the one we had with Brian. Great hiring trends, top questions for our team. And like I said to him, I'll say to you, I always learn from you, Phil. And I love serving alongside you. And I hope this conversation was helpful to you, leaders listening today. If it is, please share and subscribe. And until next time, stay curious and reach for the remarkable.